Hello class and welcome back to Sketch Science. Today we're going over a little something called the carbon cycle. Now, the carbon cycle. We went over water cycle last time. What is the carbon cycle? What makes it different? Well, first we got to start at what is carbon? Carbon is one of the elements of the periodic table. It also is used in all living things. The life on Earth is all carbon-based. So it's the base of all life on Earth. What else makes carbon special? Well, we use it in a ton of things. We use it in fuel. Think of our coal. Think of our oil. Both of those rely on carbon. It can also bond to almost an unlimited degree. What does it mean to be able to bond to an almost unlimited degree? Well, carbon, when mixed with oxygen, hydrogen, it can make incredibly long chains like no other elements can. It can also bond to itself, like with coal and all those things, to a crazy amount. You can have carbon going on in chains for a very long time. It also has 6 protons, 6 neutrons, 6 electrons. If you were looking at it on the periodic table, its weight would be 12. It would be number 6. That means it has 12 protons and 12 neutrons. That would be the 12, and 6 would be the protons/electrons. Now, carbon is found in all these living things. It's all around us, but what does that mean? What does carbon cycle mean? Why is it like this? Well, carbon can be formed into many different things. One of those things you probably heard of is carbon dioxide. Now, carbon dioxide is our good friend CO2. Where have you heard this before? Well, remember talking about photosynthesis, or even cellular respiration, if you know that. That's just the opposite of photosynthesis. Now, if you're thinking about photosynthesis, where is carbon dioxide in there? Well, that's one of the ingredients for it, right? Carbon dioxide and water, H2O, get turned into sugar and oxygen. So that carbon dioxide got turned into sugar. That's where your carbon to carbon. This carbon is part of photosynthesis. Now, if you're to turn that around and turn to cellular respiration, you would get your sugar and your oxygen that cells take in, like the cells in our body. Think, we breathe in oxygen, we use sugar, and that gets turned into carbon dioxide. We breathe out carbon dioxide and water. Water is a byproduct of us doing cellular respiration. Now, this isn't an exact chemical formula for it. If it was, it would have 6 here, 6 here, 6 here. They all have to balance out. That's kind of how this works. Both sides have to be balanced. But as you can see, once again, carbon dioxide is over here. Your carbon is also here in sugar. Carbon is used in a lot of different things. Carbon can be used in fats. That's like you take your carbon and you link on a bunch of hydrogens and oxygens everywhere on here. That fats is a long list of hydrogens and oxygens connected to one carbon. It's mostly water weight. Now, you also have proteins. Proteins are carbon-based. All of these molecules that our bodies use for energy, for rebuilding, they all use carbon. It starts with a carbon, and then it links off hydrogens, oxygens, all these other things. It's a chain off of that carbon. They're carbon chains. And finally, of course, sugars. Or, if you've ever seen, carbohydrates. Carbohydrates, notice the carbo at the beginning, carbon. All of these things that our bodies use as food are all carbon-based. Now, what does that mean for the carbon cycle? Of course, we take in carbon, we use that for body functions. And then plants also use it, photosynthesis. So in the carbon cycle, you have 4 parts. You have your photosynthesis. Those are your little plant friends. They perform photosynthesis. We have cellular respiration. Or you could just shorten it to respiration. Those are your animals. Plants also do this, by the way, but not to the extent that animals do. Animals only do this, while plants also do photosynthesis. Those are your little bunnies. Now, outside of photosynthesis, cellular respiration, there are a couple other ways that carbon gets moved around the ecosystem. One of those is decomposition. Decomposition is the breaking down of dead things. Remember that. So when things die, they have to be broken back down into the soil. The carbons that are left over in the bodies of the dead things are returned to the soil by our decomposers. Those are our little mushroom friends. I can't draw a mushroom today, but that's okay. You get the picture. That's your earthworms, that's your mushrooms, that's your decomposers. They take the dead things, they return the carbon to the soil. And finally, combustion. I'm going to make that U a little bit cleaner. Combustion. What is combustion? Combustion is basically burning things. Remember we talked about the carbon was in coal, it was in oil, things we burn? Well, that's combustion. It turns carbon from solid states back up into gases, in other things. Carbon dioxide is a byproduct of burning stuff. That's why when people say cars are damaging the environment, cars are burning their oil. They're burning the coal. They're sending that back up. Factories are burning things, sending it back into the ozone. All of this carbon's being pumped out into the atmosphere, and we don't have nearly enough plants to clean it all up. So those are the 4 steps: photosynthesis, cellular respiration, decomposition, combustion. These are all part of the carbon cycle. A picture for that might look like if you started with a tree. You start with a tree, and what do plants do? Plants have photosynthesis. Remember that. So if you have photosynthesis, for some reason, I can't remember how to spell it now. But photosynthesis starts off with plants. Then, if you have your carbon dioxide going in and your sugar coming out, you have a carbon transfer. Now, animals take this. So if you have a bunny, it takes this sugar in from the plant, and out comes CO2. There's another carbon transfer. That can be plant to animal to out. Plants also can use some of the sugar for themselves and give off CO2, but that's a lot less. Animals only consume for that. Now, if either of these 2 things were to die, their carbon would be returned to the soil by decomposition. When they die, they get returned to the soil through decomposition. that is where their carbon goes. If they don't use it, if they just die, their bodies never use the carbon, they go back down. Plants stop taking in carbon dioxide because they're dead. Now, what else? If you take this carbon that's in the soil, you can burn it. That can turn into oil. It can turn into coal over time, over millions upon millions of years. When this carbon's in the soil, it can be returned to the air through combustion. If you were to light a tree on fire, the carbon could come up into the air as well through combustion. Supposedly, if you lit the bunny on fire too, the bunny could have CO2 coming into the air through combustion. Any of these things, if they were to burn, they would go back into the air. The smoke, the burning of the item would cause combustion, and CO2 would be returned to the atmosphere. Then, once again, the plants have to take that CO2 back out through photosynthesis. We take the sugar made through photosynthesis as consumers. We consume that item. We use that sugar for our own energy. Carbon stores the energy. We use it, and out comes more CO2 from the byproduct of us using that energy. And if anything dies, it gets broken back into the soil. Our carbon returns to the ground. And if it sits there long enough, it will come back as coal or oil. Otherwise, it will be used as plants, as nutrients for repeating the cycle. So remember, there are 4 parts to the carbon cycle. And they kind of just go all over the place like a giant spider web. They go in all different directions because anything can burn combustion to the air. But plants started off with photosynthesis. Photosynthesis takes the carbon out of the ground, out of the air, and turns it into something useful. Then we have cellular respiration. It takes the carbon from the sugars made during photosynthesis, from all the different things made during photosynthesis. It takes that carbon, breaks it down into energy for living things, for our bodies. And the byproduct of that, so in for photosynthesis is CO2, out is C6H12O6. In for cellular respiration is C6H12O6, and out is CO2. All of these, this is the transfer of carbon. Finally, we have our other 2, which is decomposition which is taking living things, the carbon in living things, and returning it to the soil as carbon, as nutrients. So I'm just going carbon to carbon here because carbon's in our bodies. It's part of what makes us. It's part of our cells. All that's made of carbon. So when we die, it just takes that, returns it to the soil to be used again as fuel for plants, as photosynthesis, or to form oil, to form coal over thousands of years of just dead things piling up. It eventually turns into oil. Think about the dinosaurs that we use as fuel nowadays, as the oil we use nowadays. And finally, you have combustion, which is more of carbon in any living thing, any dead thing, any broken down thing where it's been broken into coal or oil. And as it burns, it gets mixed with oxygen because oxygen is also fuel for a fire. Oxygen is the fuel to burn the carbon with, and out comes CO2 into the air. If you look, all of these things are transferring carbon. That's the idea of the carbon cycle. It's taking carbon from living and non-living things and moving it around. Us humans, we take that to an extreme degree where we kind of burn way too much stuff. We use too much combustion in our energy, and that causes pollution. There's not enough plants to pull that carbon back out of the atmosphere. That is the carbon cycle. Those are the 4 parts. Now, if you have any questions about the carbon cycle, or any comments about my spelling abilities in this, especially with photosynthesis. For some reason, I was blanking on that today. Please don't be afraid to leave a comment. As always, like the video so you can come back and watch it anytime, and it's a lot easier to find because there's that little liked folder in your YouTube account, and you can find videos you've liked a lot easier than having to search it up all the time. And always, if you just want to go to the channel to find the video too, if you don't want to like the video, well, always subscribe, because that allows you to find the channel faster if you didn't want to like the video. That way you can find the video just as easy. And always, you can come to find more videos, learn more things. I'll be here just for you. So comment, like, and subscribe, and I will see you next time.